It's August 5th, 2014. It's a Tuesday. I just now rented this cargo van from U-Haul to take my Class C CDL pre-drive inspection test and the driving test tomorrow. So I thought I'd make a video of it since it doesn't look like on YouTube that there's any Class C vehicles to look at for if you're getting into a Class C vehicle for a CDL test. Anyway, we'll start with there should be no obstructions on the, making sure that there's no obstructions on top or on the sides of the van that would prevent you, or that would scratch along the van as you're going. And which there isn't where it's parked at as you just approach the van, I mean. Then you want to make sure that if you do have to back up, like in the position that I am in, I would have to back up to continue. If I was going to back up, then I'd have to go back there and manually check to make sure that there's nobody behind me in my blind spot. Next, you want to look at the mirror, the windows itself. The windshield is not cracked or have any obstructions on it like stickers, mud, dirt, bug spots, snow, etc. And if it does, you have to clean that off before you proceed for safety. Everything looks good up there. Then you want to continue to the grill itself, that there's no obstruction to the grill and that the whole entire piece of the grill is together in case you hit any birds and whatnot, and it wouldn't be. So you want to make sure that's all there, and mainly for the main reason so the engine can breathe. You want to make sure that the light fixtures are on and intact. We'll check the lighting later on. And that the front bumper itself is attached and intact. If there happens to be, on U-Hauls there isn't a license plate, but if there happens to be a license plate that's firmly secure in place there, that it should be, and that it's correct and up to date and visible. And then you want to look underneath for any signs of a running leak, since I just ran it a little bit ago, which there isn't any. And then we'll continue to the inside for a second. Now I go in the inside, manually come up here, and I've already connected the parking brake, and put on the parking brake. It's already down depressed, which you want to do for safety. Tell the instructor this too, so that he knows you're doing it for safety reasons, obviously. And then you want to hit your hood compartment. To come back here and look at the hood compartment. Alright, and first off the bat, you want to make sure that those hinges are secured and not bent in any way. And mainly that this latch up here is secure and it won't cause the hood to come flying up if it breaks off, and that this latch component right here is secure. Then you want to look how it started my battery. The battery cables themselves are not corroded. I'll check the expiration date on the battery itself to make sure that it doesn't need maintained or changed. Follow the electrical cables from the battery, making sure that they're not close to any running parts of the engine. Then they look to be securely mounted along the back side of this. And then if you could see inside, you can't because of the insulation cover on these newer vans, but if you see inside, you'd want to make sure that those wires themselves aren't torn or replaced illegally along itself all the way back over here to the fuse box. In the fuse box itself, if you can get to it, which this one you can't really get to it, but there should be extra fuses in the fuse box ready to go in case something goes out. So you have that. You want to check all your other hoses for coolant hoses, like this coolant hose right there has a big old clamp on it. You want to make sure that there's a clamp on both sides of that hose and that there's no leaks or cracks along the hose, and that the hose is not near anything that's running parts like that fan. The fan belt. This is your air filter. You want to take this off, check the air filter to make sure the engine can breathe properly, especially if you see any signs of it not being able to breathe properly from sound or from the back exhaust, coughing and whatnot. It'll give you signs that the air filter needs changed. You want to look back there, and there's an alternator. You want to make sure that the alternator is secured in at least two different bolts on the alternator in most vehicles. This one might have three because of how tightly back there it is secured. And you want to make sure that pulley in front of that alternator is secure and not of any wear or tear. You want to make sure the belt itself is, this one looks to be new looking, but you want to make sure it doesn't have any cracks or wears and tears in the inside and outside, but mainly on the inside where it rubs against the pulley. You want to make sure to look at the water pump itself, which you have to see from way back over in there, and the air compressor from over there, that the water pump does not have any leaks and is securely attached, and the air compressor does not have any leaks outside the condensation from the condenser. On the belt itself, they can be bi belt or whatever system, where they have two belts, or just a regular big belt like this one has. This one has just a mono belt of one singular belt going all the way across. And so if it had two or one, you need to point that out. Lost my train of thought a second, I'm sorry. Let me recapture that. I think I talked about, yeah, linkage, okay. Then I'll go on to check the fluids. You want to check all the fluids of your vehicle, including the oil. The oil should be checked when the engine is cold, and allow it to cool down for a good 20 minutes or so. Pull the dipstick out once, wipe it off, put the dipsticks back in, read it a second time, because that'll give you the real reading. The first reading that you pull out will be a false reading, because the engine has to cool down. Oil has to come back out of the engine into the oil pan where you check it at. This is the lid for the oil. Want to make sure you put 5W30 in it if it needs it, and tighten the lid securely, and make sure there's no leaks or anything along that, since this is a flexible hose. This should be your transmission fluid. You want to check that last after you have the engine running for a while, because the engine needs to be running to check the transmission fluid the right way. If the engine's cold, you'll get a false reading. For the transmission, you want to follow that down to the actual transmission itself, if you can see it way up underneath there, and make sure it's attached. It's got about 6 different bolts on it, and you want to make sure it's attached firmly to the frame body of the van, and that there's no leaks coming off of any hoses coming off the transmission. The oil itself, after checking it, you want to follow it down to the oil pan and make sure there's no leaks or anything coming off of the oil pan itself, and make sure to check the hoses coming off of it, that there's no wear and tear, and that all hoses in the engine compartment should have at least 2 clamps, one clamp on either end of the hose itself, holding things on there. And your airflow system has any clamps are tightened, and so on your airflow. Then I would move on to your window washer fluid, which is right here. You can barely see it down there that it is full. We'll check the window washer pump deal later on when we run the window wipers to show you that it does work. Dot 3. This will be your steering fluid. You want to follow your steering system. There's a steering column behind there. Go all the way down there, all your steering linkage down to your steering box. This will have your steering fluid here in the top for your power steering, where you put that in at, and you just take this out. There's a little dipstick at the end of the lid, and that's how you check it. You want to make sure all the hoses to your power steering don't have any leaks, and that they're all clamped off correctly, and that your linkage is all secured to the body down underneath, which if you can see it, it's a little hard to see in this little compact engine the way GMC did it, but it'll have to work. You want to, if you can see it, you want to be able to see the fans that turn around in here, if all possible, that all the fan blades are attached, and as properly turns while you run the engine and whatnot, without sticking any linkages, limbs or nothing in the engine itself to look. But on this current engine, you can't even see it, so we're going to bypass that other than to point it out. Engine coolant itself, if the engine is hot or has been running anytime lately, you would wait about 20 minutes to be able to check this, because this is under pressure, and it will be scalding hot, and it can burn yourself if you take it off. If you need to press it, if you need to check it right off the bat immediately for something, you want to look at the overflow. The overflow should be about half full, like it is right there, for your overflow for your coolant. Otherwise, you can take this off after the engine cools down. I think I've covered everything mainly, other than and then your brake. I don't know if you can even see the brake deal for that. Following the linkage all the way down. I believe that's your brakes right there. What the hell? They got big old. Yeah. And this right here should be your brake fluid. And your brake fluid blocks, you want to check that same way you do with the power steering. This will have a dipstick on the bottom of it. You want to make sure it's halfway at this mirror mark. That's why they have this 2 compartment there. You want to follow the brake lines all the way down to all your axles and the back axles, making sure that those are all clamped and secure, and that they're not leaking. With the steering fluid, the same way, that the steering lines that go to the front here on both tires are not leaking. Then we want to move on real quick to the tires, and then I'll have to cut this to another video, so I'll be paying attention to what I do in here this time. But the tires itself, you want to make sure are even all the way across on tread wear, and that they're no less than 30 seconds of an inch deep in tread wear. You want to have more than 30 seconds of an inch, or you can get down to wear bald tires and have an accident that way. You want to check the bead, that there's no beads or cracks or anything along the tire wall itself, and that the seal between the rim and the tire wall itself is secure. You want to check the air valve with an air gauge, and check the PSI against the manufacturer. It's a PSI level the manufacturer says. It's manufacturer specs right there. and you can find it right there in the driver's side door, or you can find it in the manual that came with the van. You want to look, I would also take the opportunity with a hammer or a bar to manually whack this with a hammer or bar that I don't have at the moment. That you can check against for a proper seal against the rim and the tire by creating pressure in a certain point, any point on the tire. Then you want to look at the rims themselves, that they're not cracked or bent, creating a false seal here, along here, and a tire blowout. And you want to make sure that there's no illegal welds, modifications to these rims. If there are, then you need to replace the rim and the tire altogether. You want to look at all these lug nuts. These are lug nut covers, so you'd have to pull each one of these covers off, and this big cover comes off too after you take the lug nuggets off, to look at the brake hub that's underneath here for any fluid leaks. But then you want to make sure when you have that you have all of these lug nuts on, the covers on, and that everything is tight and secure, and you look for signs of rust will indicate if there's any loose lug nuts, or that the rod, the bolt that's on the tread is not worn down on the lug nuts and coming loose that way. If that is the case, you'll have to replace that rod or that bolt, whatever they call it. So I'm going to pick up where I left off. I covered the tires last time and the rims. Now we're going to talk about the suspension and the brake system. Underneath there is your suspension. You should be spring or airbag. If they're airbag, you want to make sure that there's no leaks in the airbag itself. That the airbag looks to be blown up. In this case, it's spring, so you want to make sure that the spring shock absorber, and you want to make sure to mention spring shock absorber, is even width. You can stick 2 or 3 fingers in each spring all the way up. I wouldn't stick the fingers in there actually, but just, as a measurement, that it's even width all the way up. If the van was loaded, it's harder to check this because the weight of those springs on those springs will compress them down. So with the van unloaded is when you want to check that for proper linkage. If the spring had gone out, then it would be loose and have play, and then it would look smaller or more compressed than the rest of the springs in the van on each tire. You want to look at the brakes themselves, at the brake hub, weight up in there that I was talking about before, underneath this cover. Doesn't have any leaks in it. And you want to check out the brake line itself. Doesn't have any leaks in it, and the brake line itself is, since it does carry fluid, you want to check and make sure that it is clamped off on both sides and there's no tears along that line that could reduce your brake pressure. You want to check your brake pads if you can get to them, that the brake pads don't have excessive wear on them. And this one doesn't in the front have leaf springs. It does have leaf springs in the back, so I'll mention that then. But you want to look at your torque rod, your push rod, your tie rod, whatever they call that, with the bend all the way around there. You might want to check into that. This is where I have the weak spot in my CDL testing, is this part with the brakes and suspension. That's where everybody has problems. But anyway, you want to make sure that that's not bent or cracked or illegally welded in any way. And you want to check out the body and frame through here, that everything is secured to the frame where it should be. Trying to think. I covered pads, rotors. You should mention rotors, pads, and the leaf spring, shock absorbers, tie rods, torque arms, and the spacers in the back. But anyway, moving on to the next one, since I'm taking up the time here. Oh, and the other thing I want to mention about these tires, I forgot to mention that these front 2 tires on this front axle cannot be recapped or retreaded. If the tire is blown out, you cannot recap or retread the tire itself. It needs to be replaced with a brand new tire, because that, it causes a wreck automatically when they blow out in the front. You want to look at the driver's side window for any obstruction or cracks in the windows, any stickers, mud, whatever. Clean it up if there is anything on there. Replace the mirror, of course, if it's cracked. Same with the window. If it's cracked or if there's any obstructions in it to obstruct your view, you want to clean that up or replace the window if possible. Then you want to open the door. Make sure the door does swing all the way out like that, and it will shut and latch all by itself securely here. You want to make sure that does latch. Then you see the running board. This van does have a running board, so you want to make sure that's level and hooked up with the frame all the way across so it cannot catch on anything. Then we go to the gas tank. Make sure that the gas is sealed on there correctly and that there's no way that fumes can get out of the gas leak. Right there from the gas tank. Then you want to look underneath here and see if you can see the drive shaft. The drive shaft is a moving part, so you want to make sure that the drive shaft doesn't catch anything, any kind of debris like tree limbs or your brake lines or your electrical wiring, and there's nothing it can catch on. It's way down underneath there, it's hard to see. But that's where you want to, they have it built in underneath these buffers for safety along this van, it looks like, so it's way up in there and secure. But if it wasn't, you want to make sure that it is right down there, so you can see kind of the drive shaft toward the end of it there. But since it is a moving part, you want to make sure that there's no illegal welds, cracks, wears, and tear, and that nothing is caught on it. Then we move to the back tire. We want to make sure that there's even tread wear all the way across the tire. If not, you'll need to rotate and realign the tires. And you want to make sure that there's no less than 2/32 of an inch of tread wear in the tires in the back. These tires can be recapped or retreaded once, but I would always replace both of the back tires at the same time, just to keep even tread wear across for your records, to make sure that you know which tires put on when. You replace them at the same time if possible, or all four at the same time if you can afford it, with brand new tires. Then you want to check the tire again for the tire wall for any beads or cracks or wears and tears along there. That would indicate a soon pending tire blowout, and if so, you want to replace the tire. Then you want to check the rim and the seal along the rim and the tire. You want to check the air valve stem, that it's not rubbing against the rim, and you want to actually check it with a gauge and compare its PSI compared to the driver's side door manufacturer spec PSI level for this van, and air it up properly to its proper PSI, or down depending on what it is. You want to take a hammer and whack along here. This can also check for the seal here by whacking it with a hammer in any one location along the tire. We'll check to make sure that there is proper seal. Here, like I mentioned before, this is the cover for the brake hub itself, so you'll want to remove the cover and check the brake that it's not leaking inside this cover and just boiling up here at the bottom. Outside of that, if you aren't checking for that, these are covers for the lug nuts. You want to make sure that all lug nuts do exist on there. They're not missing, and that they are tightly screwed in there, in which case you want to look for signs of rust that would indicate that one of those or more of those are loose, in which case you want to take that off. Probably take the tire off and inspect it too, to make sure that the rod itself, the tread wear on the rod itself, isn't down the rod of the bolt that hooks into it if you see signs of rust. You want to make sure the rim itself is not bent, or there's no illegal welds or any cracks along the rim. If so, you'll need to replace the rim and the tire both for the proper connection. Then we go on the back. Down underneath here, you'll see the leaf springs. This vehicle, most vehicles have 5. This one only has 4 because it's a medium weight van, normal cargo van. So it will normally have 4 springs, in which case you want to make sure all 4 springs do exist, that no pieces of the springs are broken off or anything, and that there's no more excessive wear than 25% on these springs, especially the top one, for the weight. You want to look back here for the brake line, make sure it's connected by the clamp and clamped off in both locations if possible, and then along the actual brake line itself that there's no leaks or wears and tear in it. Then you want to check the brake pads if you can actually get to the brake pads, which this one you can't unless you take the whole tire off and whatnot. But you want to check the brake pads for excessive wear and tear, the motor, the rotors, the spacer, can't think of the second word for that, the spacers, and that there's no, illegal welds, that there's no leak. I mean, not leaks, but no dents, or they're in their proper position and good working condition. Then you want to make sure these leaves are connected by these 2 bolts, or 4 bolts, I should say, all the way up and nice and tight to hold that leaf spring in place. And then there's also bolts up this way that does that too. You want to make sure the frame body of the van itself is straight all the way down, since you can see it from here. All the way down, that is straight and not sideways and not feeling down or anything like that. That would be bent or out of place or illegally welded anywhere along there. If it is, the van is not in proper driving condition. Then you want to look at the axle, the rear axle itself, and transfer case right there. The transfer case has all your bolts and lug nuts, or bolts and everything tightened down there like that. All on there, none of them are missing, and there's nothing leaking out of it because it does have fluid. The front axle, I forgot to mention up there, does have a grease zerk on both sides, both tires, and so for the power steering to rotate back and forth, and so you need to grease those when they do have them. The spare tire is in good condition. The rim itself is in good condition. You don't ever want to leave without a spare tire, a way to get your van off the road in case something does happen to a tire, tire blowout or whatever does occur. You want to make sure you have one and it's in place. It's a safety device. And you want to make sure while you're down here that the back bumper is secure. Oh, well, that's fun. You're gonna get all dirty. Then you come out front here, or I mean out back. You want to make sure the license plate itself is secured in its holding place, and that it's current and up to date for Arizona it is. And then you want to make sure that the bumper, like I say, itself is secure and up to date. If you were towing anything, you want to make sure that the hitch attachment, which this one doesn't have, is secured in place there too. You want to make sure the back doors both work. Mostly that the latches are both secure. Latch here, latch there. That they do work. And then while I'm in here, I would mention that if I had cargo strapped down, I would strap it down to at least 4 points for security to keep the cargo from sliding forward into the haddock rack up there and possibly injuring or distracting me, causing a wreck. The doors do work securely. Almost. It's a brand new van, though it is. Just acted like it wasn't. Then you want to come along here underneath here and look at the gas tank. It's way up there, built up into the frame itself, hidden behind the spare wheel and whatnot way up in there. And you want to make sure that it's connected if you can see it. And so it should be way up there in there. They've got it for safety. They've got it way up in there like the drive shaft. But it is connected and there's no leaks coming off of the gas tank. And then while you're here, you want to look at the exhaust system and make sure that it's securely attached by the anchor there and whatnot. You want to look at the muffler, that there's no cracks and illegal welds or cracks or illegal welds along the muffler, catalytic converter, all the way up that, and that there's securely held on in 4 different anchoring positions between the muffler and the catalytic converter all the way up in there, and that it doesn't have any cracks or illegal welds and it's in good working condition. It's all held up straight, connected to the frame of the body. With the van running, there's a sign to look for here that if it's white smoke, there's too much oil. Blue smoke is not enough oil, and that blue smoke is the gas burning straight. So you can see smoke coming out of there. You might have an exhaust problem or a gas problem, fuel problem. Most of the time it's oil problem. You want to check the rail along here. The side doors do work if you do have side doors. That they stay connected, and they do. And there's 2 latches right there that are connected, and 2 latches up there, and then these 2 sides. Excuse me. Then you want to come up front, shut the engine bay compartment, because we're going to start the in-cab part of the test. So now we're going to try the light portion. We're going to continue from where I already checked the vehicle out, the engine compartment, and the underside of the vehicle, including the suspension and brakes and tires and rims, and did the walk around the vehicle. Now I'm going to work on the lights and then the in-cab inspection. For the lights, and this one, since it's a newer one, all you gotta do is turn it on. I want to make sure I have a radio off. I want to come back to the back, and this portion of the test. You'll have the instructor stand back here outside, not directly behind, checking that your lights work, and then you'll step on the brakes, and your instructor will tell you if the brakes work or not, because you can't have him help you here, else especially for the brakes, you can't check that and look at the same time, because you have to depress the brake pedal. Everything else you can look at your same time, but since the instructor's there, you ask for their help, and that is fine to ask for their help in that. Now we stick the left breaker on. Let's pretend we already checked the brake lights, and he said, yeah, brake lights work, the regular park lights, regular running lights work, the left blinker does work. See, for this portion of the test, since I don't have 2 people, you'll have the instructor back here looking. You don't have to go back and forth like I'm doing. But for my purposes, I have to go back and forth since it's only me here. And the right blinker does work. Now you want to find your 4-ways. 4-ways are up top. They're in that thing. Most of the newer vehicles have the 4-ways on the top. So then you come back here again, which like I say, this will all be done by your instructor in the back here. Off to the set, have him specifically stand in the rear here, off to the side. That's what you got to say for safety. And that both flashers do work. Overhead brakes and whatever would work. I'm just gonna trust that they do work, because I can't check it both, myself. You want to come up here, and your dims for your lights, your dims do work, and your flashers are working, which I mean your blinkers probably work, but we're double check that they do. Take your 4-ways off. Stick on your left blinker, and like I say, you don't have to go back and forth out of the van a billion times like I'm doing. You can just have the instructor say, yeah, you're good there, yeah. You just say left blinker, right blinker, what you're doing, and they'll tell you yeah or no if it's not working or whatever. for the purposes of the test. But see, has the blinker going? Yes, it is. Okay. All right, and then we switch on our high beams. Switch on our high beams by just clicking the thing to bright. Your brights do work. Yep. All right, the light portion of the test is done with your instructor, so now we go inside for the in-cab portion of the test. I gotta turn the radio down. You want to tell your instructor that I'm gonna flip the lights off because I'm at the road traffic there. You want to make sure that the door shuts properly as you're getting in, and that's what you should have checked on the other side too. I forgot to mention that passenger side door does work, but the instructor already knows that because he already went over one side, so they'll tell you to skip the second side unless you want to add something to it. You want to check that your seatbelt does work properly. It's nice and tight and proper. Okay. Now with the lights already on and activated, all your lighting should turn on this gauge right there like it does. Make sure that all your light indicators light up. You have to specifically say that, or else they're going to get docked for it. I know because I've already taken this test once and I got docked for these little things. But anyway, I'm trying my best to do it, and don't trust my word for it. You know, do your research and your reading up on the manual and everything, and go to truck driving school and whatnot if you need to get through it. But I'm just trying to give you a gist of how to do stuff. You want to check, make sure for safety that the horn does work, which it does. You have to specifically tell them that you're checking that the horn does work. Right. Now from this point on, after you check the horn does work and that the light indicators do turn on, you want to start your engine. Now you want to listen in your engine for any knocking noises, which could indicate a bad piston or a blown out head gasket. You don't really have to mention that, but I do for more detail. And then you're also listening for a high-pitched noise coming off the alternator belt or the AC belt when you rev it up. So there's no knocking noises. You make sure that your parking brake's on and your brakes on and everything before you do that. All right, then you want to make sure that the window wipers themselves do work. The window wipers do work, and you want to make sure that the pump themselves do work. We'll pump and clear debris off your windshield for you as you're driving, so that don't create a driving hazard on the road, but not being able to see out your windshield. Now I can get the windshield wipers off. Great. Anyway, then right as you start the engine, and if you have to restart the engine, you can at this point. But right as you restart the engine, that oil gauge right there in the top should come up immediately, followed by your amp gauge, which is over there. That should be between 12 and 14. It's right slightly higher than 12, which should be about halfway on this gauge. And then, of course, your gas. You have gas. And then your heat gauge, your coolant gauge, will come up over time as your engine gets hotter until it's about at half, or just under half, like where it's at. All those gauges are proper. You want to make sure that there are no other light indicators, like a check engine light, service light, or anything. Or you do need to get that looked at. They're mostly sensors and whatever that the van has to tell you that something's wrong itself, that it knows. And you'll want to get that looked at before you continue. The only light that is on and indicating is my parking brake, which does help you, remind you if you leave your parking brake on, that you need to do the parking brake test, that it does work, which we will do in a second. But I want to show you the steering wheel test. Now, you want to tell the instructor to continue your power steering check, that this steering wheel, a 20-inch steering wheel, can have no more than 2 inches of play, and an under 20-inch steering wheel, a normal size like car steering wheel, which is rare for a commercial vehicle, but it's supposed to have almost no play whatsoever. And by play, I mean I stick my head out the window, look at the tire itself, look at the steering wheel itself, and as you're running left to right, the tire should be turning as the steering wheel's turning, indicating that there's no play. By play, I mean if the steering wheel went all the way around and the tire didn't move, then there's too excessive play in the steering column. Next, I would check the defrost. You want to make sure that your heater and your defrost does work. The AC and everything doesn't matter so much as the heater and defrost, because of the fact that rain and moisture can gather on the windows, and you need defrost to clear those off, to clear the obstructions as you're driving. You want to not only make sure that your heater does work itself, but that you put this on defrost, and that the defrost itself does work up here, both heater and defrost, and actually is working, which it is. It's hotter than hell. From in here, you want to make sure that your mirrors are properly positioned to drive and back up with, and you can see out all of them with no obstruction. And then from here, you're going to do the brake test and your transmission test. So for right now, anyway, I'm going to place my foot on the brake, which I felt the brake actually come up. As I turned on the vehicle, you should feel the brake pedal come up, indicating that your brakes have pressure. Right now I'm going to check the parking brake, which I should have it in a clear spot to do this, but I'm going to cheat for now since this is where I parked it at. I'm going to put it in drive. As I'm putting it in drive, I want to make sure that the transmission, I feel the transmission is pretty stiff, and there's not free play in the transmission all the way up and down and whatnot. We are in drive now with the brake on with my foot on the brake pedal. The parking brake is depressed, so I want to see if it will crawl forward by itself or not on the parking brake, which it will not. See, when you give it gas on the parking brake, it will not go forward because your parking brake is depressed, which is good. That means I have a good parking brake. Transmission does go back into park on its own. Now you want to depress the parking brake, and I would drive forward if possible, but in this situation I'm not going to be able to drive forward too far, but we'll try to see if I can do it. But you want to put your foot on the brake pedal as usual, put it down and drive forward a couple feet, and then hit stop. Or not stop as rough as I just did, but you want to make sure that the brake itself does work. And what I would also tell the instructor is that I would try in the reverse gear to make sure the transmission in reverse does work. You put it in reverse. Oops, I don't think I have it in reverse. Yes, I do. Okay, now with in reverse, you want to honk. Since this vehicle does not have a backup alarm, you want to always honk in reverse because you have a blind spot back. Well, you have two blind spots back there that's hard to see, so you want to warn pedestrians and whatnot. So now I would honk like so, back up, and check it like so that it does work. Alright, the brake test has been completed. I checked the regular service brakes and the parking brake. Now I want to check that there's safety equipment on board, like extra fuses in the fuse box up front, or extra fuses in here. That's not a mandatory thing. In some states it is, some states it's not. Then it is mandatory to have at least three safety triangles that you can stick out on the roadway for obstruction, you know, to warn people that you broke down on the roadway. And you want to have a fire extinguisher that is rated for its expiration, properly rated for its expiration, you know, a proper rate fire extinguisher, up to date and whatnot. And also it helps to check that there's a manual in the vehicle to make sure if you have any problems how to fix them, and that there is a jack and a way to change your spare on the side of the road in case of your van causes obstruction on the side of a, you know, bad dangerous spot on the road because you don't have a jack or spare to change your spare tire with. Jack or four-way, so you want to have those with you too, if at all possible. Some DOT certified states that you may live in also require that there's a DOT certified headache rack bulkhead in the back, which there is in this van. All U-Haul vans do come with the cargo, because it's a cargo van, it does come with the cargo compartment attached, and you want to make sure to mention that in some states. In this state it's not on the list of stuff to mention, but I'd still mention it to my instructor. I'm trying to think. You want to make sure the transmission, the brake test, the lights work, the horn works, the window washer fluid works, and the window blades themselves are not cracked or frayed, and you can do that by that test, by making sure that the window washers, you know, when you run water on the window, that it clears it off evenly all the way across and leaves no streaks. You want to make sure that the defrost is working, and you want to make sure you have safety equipment. You want to make sure you are wearing your safety belt, and that the door is latched shut tightly. Trying to think if I missed anything. I think that's everything. So I the other day, I guess I'll mention since I have a couple minutes here, I forgot to honk the horn, which is just a little thing. So I made sure to honk the horn a couple times in this test, and that's what I'm gonna do tomorrow to make damn sure he knows that I honked the horn. And then I forgot the lighting indicators. Even though I remembered the lighting outside, I forgot the lighting indicators themselves. Even though I thought of them, I didn't say it. A lot of things I didn't, that's the catch, a lot of things I pointed at but didn't actually say, like your brake rotors, your brake drums, your brake pads, your brake lines, your spacers back there for your suspension, your tie bar, or they call them push rods, or a torque arm, your spring shock absorber or airbag shock absorber. You have to say that, or you can't say spring or airbag and they're just going to be like, docked, because you didn't say shock absorber, so make sure you say that. Where I get caught up at is the suspension and the brakes, so I wouldn't be too surprised if I get a couple knocks or misses on the brakes or suspension. That's why I'm trying to go over it over and over at. But The main thing about the engine compartment is that the hoses, you mentioned over and over again that the different hoses don't have any leaks in them, and that they're properly clamped on both sides of the hose, and that they're away from moving parts, and that the wiring, electrical wiring, is the same, away from moving parts and is not tore anywhere. And then that your alternator belt, you want to go into a 10 minute thing about that, with all its attachments and its no frays, and you want to make sure to mention that to look underneath the alternator belt itself, the underside, and that if there's 3/4 inch give on it that you can have. But anyway, this video is getting pretty long, so I better cut it. But like and subscribe if you don't find my video confusing. I hope it's not that confusing, because this whole test is kind of half confusing, I think. But I learned a lot in it about my vehicle and how to maintain it and properly look for stuff, so it was worth it. I think, in my opinion, it's worth it to take it a couple times to learn it. Hopefully I pass it by tomorrow. Like I say, I didn't pass it the first time, but there's 54 questions, and I missed 17 out of the 13 possible, so I was pretty close. And like I say, one of them was the horn, one of them was the light indicator, one was forgot to mention the actual shock absorber itself. I touched it and everything, but he said I didn't mention it. And then I forget what the other one was. I think brake pad or brake rotors I forgot to mention, so one of those two. So if I mention all those, it should be good. But we'll see tomorrow. I'm going to keep going over and over and over this test and adding stuff when I see it and whatnot. And I have a cheat sheet to go by too. You can print off a cheat sheet that they have in the internet. On the internet, some websites will let you carry this cheat sheet with you, and then some will not let you carry anything with you at all. But this basically gives you a Class A and Class C basic check of what all to look for. So, and they are available online. I found them just for Googling pre-drive inspection checklist, and you'll find it. But anyway, I better get going. This video's getting pretty long. Like and subscribe if you find the comments useful. Mention anything I forgot, or anything you learned from my video. Hopefully I teach a lot of people that are looking into driving a Class C vehicle like I am how to do it properly, because there's a lot of videos on Class A and Class B, but nothing on Class C. So obviously you'll notice it's a commercial driver's license. It says now. I don't know if you can get it right there, commercial driver's license. So I did pass my Class C CDL. Talk about all the law and hoops and loops and everything you gotta jump through to get that thing. They just about made me have to redo the application and everything today, like I was brand new there, and I was like, I was here less than 2 weeks ago. Finally got it anyway, but man, there for a second it was making me wonder, even after taking the driving test. Basically, I took the pre-drive inspection test and I passed everything except for I forgot to mention the steering box itself. I pointed at it, but I forgot to mention it. And then I forgot to take and do the parking brake test. I did the regular brake test, but I forgot the parking brake test to make sure the parking brake works. But that was only 2 things I missed out of 54 possible things to look for, which is really good. Showed that I did a lot of work studying on it. Then we did the backup test, and he had me back up a couple different directions, and I misunderstood him on one deal where I thought he meant to back 90 on a 90-degree turn and come up, and I was pretty proud of myself for doing it and lined the van up just right and everything. And he said, no, you're supposed to go around the cone and in this way. And I was like, oops. So I missed that part, so I missed 3 or 4 points or something on the backing up part, but I did better than everybody else did. Apparently he had a bunch of bus from Red Cloud or someplace come through earlier that he was talking to me about, and the lowest the other guys made it was like 6 points off or something, and I only made it with 3 points off the test, so that's not too bad. Then I went on the driving test portion of it, where we went out driving on the interstate and back, and we went over a railroad crossing, and I didn't think to look at the 4 train crossing the railroad crossing because other traffic was going through and whatnot, and I forgot. Driving a CDL vehicle, you gotta look. So I remembered to do it on the second time when he had us go right back through there, because he's checking to see if I was actually going to remember it or not. And so I actually did remember to look both directions and slowed the van down and everything before I went across that crossing. I was able to navigate the lanes and everything and stop at stop signs ahead of time and everything, so I did pretty good on that one. I only got 1 or 2 docks on that one. So I pretty much passed with flying colors. Finally got the Class C CDL. I don't have a hazmat endorsement yet, so I have to check with whatever company